My name is Trisha Gee. That is a great question. Right now, I'm actually on sabbatical, but I have been, for the last 7 years, I've been a developer advocate, which means that I'm a developer advocate for sort of Java and Java programming and that kind of thing. So mostly what I do is I show people new features in Java or new ways of using the language they might not have thought of. And I also help with the tooling associated with writing Java programs. Before that, I was a Java developer for like 10, 15 years. I worked for investment banks, for consultancies, for not-for-profit organizations, some web apps and stuff like that. So it's a broad range of experience. I really enjoy development. I really like coding. I really like solving problems with a language or with a set of tools. But what I found, the itch that wasn't being scratched, is I also really like telling people about the cool stuff I found. So like I use IntelliJ IDEA for writing my programs, and there were so many cool things that it could do for me that really made my life a lot easier for years and years. That what I thought was kind of cool is if instead of just me being one person using those features and doing a few features and bugs and stuff, why don't I go out and tell other people how this is going to help them code faster or with fewer errors, or for me in a way which is actually just more fun. Yeah, so 97 things every Java programmer should know. I was asked to contribute to that asked to contribute some articles to that. But then I had read 97 things every programmer should know and 97 things every architect should know. And I loved those books and I loved the contributions. One of the things I felt was missing was there weren't so many women developers writing about their experiences. So there were largely a lot of male authors there. And with 97 things every Java programmer should know, I was like actively putting women developers in contact with a publisher to say, you should, to the woman developer, you should write something for this book because you've got something to say, and maybe it's something a little bit different from what other people were saying. So I was like finding a lot of people and pushing them forward for the book, and then the publisher in the end said, look, the other editor, Kevlin, he really appreciates the help that you're giving. So why don't you come on board as the 50% editor so that you both sort of share the load? And so that's kind of how I got involved. It was partly my passion for sort of sharing the stuff that I know, but it's also my passion for sort of connecting people and for giving visibility to people who don't always get visibility. Generally speaking, that's women programmers, although I'm trying to extend my network into other underrepresented groups as well. But like, I like to make friends and meet people and connect with people, particularly if they've got voices that we don't normally hear in our industry. And not only do I want to hear from them, I want everyone to hear from them. So yes, so that was 97 things. With Head First Java, that came off the back of me having done 97 things every Java programmer should know. And the publisher reached out to me and said, look, we're doing the 3rd edition of this. We could use a little bit of help with some of the modern Java stuff, which we have a relationship with you. So this would be really great if you could come on board and help us with that. So, and that's Head First Java specifically is something I've really wanted to do for like years and years and years. I spoke to O'Reilly about it nearly 10 years ago, sort of saying like, how can I get involved in writing a Head First book? And this was one of those things which just kind of gently, like it takes its time and you kind of have to put your feelers out there and you have to be really keen to put your hand up and say me, 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 me. And these things might come to you eventually if you just keep saying, please pick me enough times. Yeah, so I did a lot of traditional development. I graduated from university in 2001, so my sort of professional development career sort of started at the turn of the century, which I really hate because it makes me feel really old. And a lot of that development in large manufacturing organizations and banks and stuff is by necessity really closed source. So everything you do is kind of like it's only your team sees it, and it's quite difficult. When you're trying to advance your career, you can't really show anyone I did this thing, because like it's kind of closed source, and only the people you work with know about that. So from a personal career perspective, it became interesting to me to be involved in things. Originally I was building websites, which is very visual, and then later on open source code. It became interesting to be involved in stuff to actually have something to show to people, to say, I do this. And it's absolutely terrifying, because then people can see your code and maybe they don't like it, and maybe you're not good at programming, and that's kind of scary. But this is one of those things that sort of the more you do, the more visibility you get for your stuff, the more likely you are to find the types of organizations or the types of people who kind of connect with your style or with your strengths, or even your weaknesses. And so I got interested in doing open source from a sort of personal career point of view. Then I worked for a company in London, a financial exchange actually, which open sourced a small part of their financial exchange. And that was really important to them in terms of getting a different kind of like marketing, a different type of recruitment tool. Like, here, we do this cool stuff, have a look at the stuff that we do. And it opened up things for them to be able to go to conferences and talk about it, which is how I started doing sort of DevRel and developer advocacy kind of things. And then off the back of that, I started working for MongoDB, which was an open source company. They did the database and all the drivers, the language drivers, are all the code's available on GitHub. It's all visible. They accept contributions from outside, and it was an entirely different way of working, which I thought was it takes a bit of getting used to, but I thought it was really interesting, and it's a good way to build community and a good way to sort of get good vibes from developers about your product. I started many years ago. I started with Basic, like not Visual Basic, like pre-Visual Basic, a long time ago. So I did Basic on BBC Micro, which is available in the UK. At school, I learned Pascal using Turbo Pascal. When I went to university, they were using this new language called Java, which was obviously a while ago. And I was also, in my early career, back in sort of early noughties, I was doing quite a lot of web development. So I was doing Java backends, JavaScript, and web technologies and CSS on the front end. One of my early jobs was to make sure the UI looked the same between Netscape and Internet Explorer, which now seems entirely irrelevant because that's a long time ago. But this is before any sort of frameworks, any consistency around the web front end way of doing stuff. Like there was no React, there was none of that kind of thing. I've told this story a few times, but I'm still not entirely sure what the truth is, because you just kind of end up following a particular path. I did learn programming at my primary school when I was about 9. My parents thought back in the sort of like late 80s that computers seemed to be a good thing, that perhaps their children should be computer literate. My parents were teachers. Me and my sister, we should be computer literate because this is probably important for our careers. So they kind of encouraged us to play with the computer in terms of coding, but also in terms of like word processing, desktop publishing, anything which uses the computer as a tool. When I was about 16, so in the UK, you have to narrow down your choices at 16 for the subjects you study, and you had to narrow them down to 3, which is not very many. And I used to like all my subjects. So I picked maths and physics, because you can go on to engineering or you can go on to a bunch of things with maths and physics. And I picked computer science because I really liked computers. Thank you. I picked computer science because I like computers, I like programming, and I thought it'll be kind of fun to do it between 16 and 18. But what I'll do when I grow up is I'll be an astrophysicist. So with my maths and physics, I can do that. And then throughout the course of doing those 3 subjects between 16 and 18, I then had to make my university choices. And the way it works in the UK is you have to apply. You can't just apply for a university and then kind of like figure out what your degree will be later on. You have to pick your degree like now when you're 17, which was challenging. And the maths, I was kind of doing okay with the maths. The physics, I did okay on physics. I just didn't really enjoy it very much. And the computing with the programming, like I was really enjoying that. So I thought I'll study that at university, then I'll have a sciencey type of degree. So I still have a lot of options open to me as to what I do with my career. At the time, I was not thinking about being a computer programmer because I'm a very active person. I was like part of the athletics team and did a bit of basketball, a bit of netball, a bit of running. And I just, the thought of being sat down at a computer for 8 hours a day was not the most exciting thought in the world for me. I thought, why would anyone sit at a desk for sort of 8 hours a day and be forced to type stuff out all day? But it just turned out that as I was doing computer science, and I also did a placement year in industry, I worked for Ford Motor Company between my second and third year at university. So there, it was a paid internship for a year, and I learned like how computer science is really used in a real enterprise. And I liked working for Ford because Ford is clear what Ford do, right? They take parts and build cars, right? And you can kind of see how, I was going to say informatica, I'm thinking in Spanish now. You can see how like computer science and information theory and all of this sort of system stuff, you can see how that applies to a business like manufacturing. And you can see how programming can kind of help create tools that helps the company do more. So my computer science degree plus my year in industry really helped me see, like, not only do I enjoy programming, but I get. Well, then don't go near it. Oh, don't go near the spider. It's all right. It's just a spider. The year in industry and the computer science degree, enjoying the programming made me realize that actually I can get a job here which pays me well. From the beginning, I now have a year's experience in industry as well with a computer science degree. I had friends who were doing things like systems jobs and support jobs as well. So I could kind of see what they were doing in terms of, more like operations types of jobs. And I just thought, well, I get paid quite a lot of money for doing something I quite like that seems to have an impact on how businesses operate. And that's kind of like carried me forth for the last 20 odd years, really. Oh, that's a great question and a good time to ask me that question, because, can you not do that, please? Because I'm on sabbatical. I am looking after two little monsters, and you are a monster, and you are a monster. And I'm trying to figure out what's next. So what I enjoy about the developer advocacy is the sort of teaching aspect, if you like, the telling people what I know, and Amy, please don't do that, giving people tips and tricks that I found, and I really enjoy that. So I want to carry on some of that, but I think I might do that. I'm enjoying writing the books for that, kind of sharing my knowledge through the books. I'm kind of in progress with another book right now about how to use IntelliJ IDEA effectively. So that hopefully will be finished by the end of the year. End of the year? Yeah, I really hope so. And I kind of would like to do a bit of consulting and training. I definitely want to go on site with real development teams, because one of the downsides of both developer advocacy and in particular the 2+ years of COVID that we've had is that I haven't been like hands-on in a development team for a long time now, and I really want to sort of get back in and see what problems people are solving, how they're using the technology these days, you know, what's good, what's bad, and how does it feel. Can you stop that, please? So I really want to get a bit more hands-on stuff. So the short version is, can you stop? The short version is, can you stop? The short version is, can you go downstairs, please? I don't really know. I want to do a bit of everything, really. I want to carry on coding. I want to carry on coaching, teaching. I'd like to do some videos. I want to carry on writing. There's not enough time in the day to do all of those things. But if I can find something which lets me balance all of that and earns me money, then that would be great. And if anyone hears this interview and then has a good job for me, then please do send it my way. They are there. They are there. It's a non-zero number. One of the things I've found is, so it can be a bit tricky, because being a woman developer kind of automatically gives you this second job of, as well as actually coding, you have to be like a professional woman developer, which means that people ask you a lot of stuff about, like, do you know any other women who can do this? Can you connect me with women who can speak at conferences or talk on podcasts? Or like, you kind of automatically become a conduit to these mythical women developers. And to begin with, particularly if you're working in a lot of traditional enterprises, you won't have that network, because in the early jobs that I had, like, I would know maybe one other woman on the team. And in my early career, they were much older than me, so they were not like part of my generation at all. And one of the things that I've done is really actively built up that network of women developers, women architects, women techies. One of the other thing I found, which is kind of related to this, is that women often end up making sideways moves from technical role. So you might do like a computer science degree, do programming, but then you'll end up doing something like project management, program management, even developer advocacy, technical writing, these kinds of roles. And often traditional developers, by which I mean like white male developers, don't count those as being technical roles and automatically assume that if you're a woman, you don't know anything about technology because you're only a project manager or you're only a technical writer. And one of the other jobs I have, apart from trying to gather as many women techies around me as possible, is to try and broaden this scope of what is considered technical, what needs technical skills, or what is going to give you some sort of knowledge of the technical landscape, even if you're not doing development. So technical writing, for example, it's impossible to write documentation for technical products without technical knowledge. And yet somehow we just dismiss all of these technical writers as not being technical, despite the fact that it's in their title. So it's a long-winded way of saying, you know, there definitely is a network of women out there doing technical roles. They don't necessarily always look like, you know, hands on the keyboard programmers, although there's plenty of those as well. Can you stop, please? You also don't see as many in open source as you see of the men, because in my experience and the experience of some of the women I know, they're not always treated the same in open source as the men. So they sometimes get harsher criticism, more difficult to get pull requests accepted. And we are our own worst critics as well. So it's difficult for us to put ourselves forward for something where we think we might get criticism. So on top of the fact that there aren't as many women in technology as there are men, I reckon it's probably about 20%, based on what I've read, what I've heard, who I've spoken to. About 20% of technical professionals are women. When you look at more visible roles, conference speakers, open source people, DevRel, writers, etc., it's more like 5% women, because those of us who are in the industry find it that much more difficult to put ourselves out there and sort of expose ourselves potentially to higher criticism. So that's why you don't see even as many women in the industry as there actually are in the industry, if that makes sense. If you are a woman, definitely go for it and do it. Things are often not as bad as you think it is. You're afraid of some of these things happening. I was afraid when I started being more active on Twitter and speaking at conferences. I was afraid that I would get a lot more backlash than I did. And honestly, so far, everything's been very positive, particularly in the Java community. The community is very positive, very supportive. As soon as you're even slightly visible, you get invited to all sorts of stuff. So that kind of opens up your world. So if you are a woman in this world, do try it, because it will open up so many possibilities for you. There's a lot of things that organizers and, you know, open source maintainers and stuff can do. And one of those things is mainly, can you not do that there, please? One of those things is to actually actively go out and find people, not just expect women to come to you, because the women who are active are already significantly overloaded with work. And the women who aren't active, you haven't necessarily found them yet. So you've got to dig a lot deeper to try and find these women who are potentially able to come to you. You have to showcase the women that you have. So if you're a conference, for example, looking for women speakers, you must check all the photos on your conference website, because 9 out of 10 of these conferences just have photos of white men all over their conference, and then women don't pay to come to your conference, and they don't apply to be conference speakers. So if you do have women in any roles of any part of your organization, make sure that they're visible, and make sure that they are, that not just women, of course, this applies for any underrepresented group. So a lot of the guys are white guys, and that's not all that's it's not just white guys in our industry. There's a lot of other people too. But it is difficult. It is difficult. It's like a multi-pronged approach. Organisers and maintainers just have to work a lot harder to try and reach out. Those of us who are in this position need to put ourselves forward a bit more. We need to be role models for more women, so that they can see us and they can go, oh, it is possible to do. And it's going to be a bit of a slow process. It has been a bit of a slow process, because over the last 20 years, things have changed, but they're changing slowly. So we just have to keep working at it, really. Oh yeah, and another thing we really need to get better in our industry is empathy across the board. Like, way less of this, I'm one of these and you're one of those and you don't fit in my little box, which makes no sense to me, because as technologists, our whole job is to sort of ask you, who are you? What do you want? What problems can I solve for you? Empathy is going to make you a better technologist on the whole. And I think if our industry just embraces empathy as a skill much more, then Amy, stop please. If we embrace empathy as a skill a lot more, we can be more inclusive, we can find more people, we can recognize these people with slightly different skills that maybe we can bring into our industry. And if we can be a bit less like, you like tabs and I like spaces, so therefore we can't be friends, which is ridiculous, and a bit more like, hey, you're kind of interested in technology and so am I, then I think we can all grow together and we can make a much better industry for technology. It's super important. It's important across so many different dimensions. It's kind of difficult to understate, and there's a lot of studies on it. But I remember reading one study in particular about a development team. I don't think I want to really name any of the tools, but like a well-known tool was doing things like it was doing that face tracking thing, so you can put like masks on people's faces and stuff like that. And they didn't test it on, they didn't have any people of color on their team. They didn't test it on people of color, and it didn't work with people with color. And that's kind of, your users are diverse. You absolutely have to have a diverse team. Otherwise, can you please be quiet? Your users are diverse, so you must have developers, or at least a developer mindset that is going to embrace all of your users. And you can't just appeal to a small subset of particularly white males. It's really important that you have women, people of color, people from LGBTQ, etc. All of these different things, because they just bring different users to your product, but also they bring different mindsets. There's a study which shows that the more women you add to your team, the more productive your team is, up to and including 100% women in your team. I don't really know the ins and outs of that, but I have read a lot of studies, and there's been a lot more studies on gender diversity, but in terms of gender diversity, many companies recognize that it's extremely important to have more than one woman on the team for their viewpoint. People work differently together. People have different ideas together. My experience of the way that women work, this is again a gross generalization. My experience of the way that women work is that they are generally prefer to work in a more collaborative way. They tend to think about the gaps between what different people are doing, and they can bring a product together in a different way to someone who wants to work on this, and I want to tick this box, and I want to get this thing done. It's a gross generalization, but the overall thing is you need diversity, you need people who think differently so that you can fill in the gaps in the way that your team works. Firstly, the first most important piece of advice is don't let anyone tell you, either explicitly or implicitly, that it's not for you because you're a girl. You will have both subtle and unsubtle pushback. And it will be difficult if you're in a room full of guys and there's only one or a handful of girls. you'll think that, oh, well, maybe this isn't really for me. One, it's not true. Two, I have found that being different is a superpower. If you interview for a job and 10 people interview for that job and one woman interviews for the job, they remember you. You stand out. And I found that this, like, being different is a superpower, and you can get it to work for you, but you do have to embrace it, that, you know, you will stand out from the crowd. You are not just one of many. And you have to sort of think of that as being a good thing. The other thing I really always want to tell people who are interested in technology is that programming specifically, it's not what you think it is. It's not just sitting down at a computer and just typing away until the computer does what it's told. It shouldn't be. There are jobs like that. It shouldn't be. It is talking to people, finding out what is it they want, what are the problems that can be solved, are there different ways of doing that? There's like research, there's like playing, investigation, there's there's a lot of creativity in terms of somebody says they want this red button and this is what the code base does. How do we get that to work? And is the red button even the right solution? And I really love that, because it's not just about like old-fashioned programming of like, you were told, do this feature, write these lines of code. That's just not how programming works at all. It's much more creative. It's much more collaborative, building stuff together, trying to solve business problems. Which leads me to my third piece of advice, which is that not all jobs are created equal, and not all companies are created equal. So for the first 15 years of my career, my job title was the same. I was a Java developer. And I worked in, I don't know, like 6 or 7 different jobs, more, like definitely more than 3 jobs. And all of those companies, despite the fact my job title was the same, despite the fact they were asking for the same types of skills, those jobs were all very different. The team sizes were different, the business pressures were different, the pace of things was different. When I worked for a small startup, it was all like now. When I worked for a bigger, older enterprise like Ford, there are deadlines for sure, but it's much more measured. It's much more like, let's split it down into deliverables. So I'm not saying one way is better than another. It's just that they work very differently depending on where you work. The people you work with are different. Sometimes I've worked with very young teams with a lot of energy. I've worked with mature teams, which I love because you learn so much of these more mature teams. The favorite teams that I've worked with have this mix, have diversity. They have like older people who are more experienced, who, they don't type very much more often than not. They spend a lot of time thinking. And then when they actually write something, you're like, holy cow, how did you come up with that? And mixed in with those are juniors who, I was very mid-level in this particular team. And the juniors were sort of asking me like, why do you do it that way? And I'm like, because it's the best way. But why? Oh, I don't really know. And so having like the juniors sort of challenge you, and the seniors sort of, you see them thinking and working things through and applying their experience. That was like an entirely different experience for me as well. So all of these companies, all of these teams, all of the products that you work on, they're all very different. And if you do get put off by speaking to a certain set of people, or hearing about a certain job, or interviewing for a certain role, if you do think, oh God, I don't think I really like that, don't think that that is all of technology, because it absolutely is not. It's such a huge space, and you can find your space in that space. There's a slot for you, definitely. And it's a bit like dating. You just kind of have to go out there and find the thing which is going to work for you at that time in your life. I mean, not really. My main driving factor for me getting into IT was, it was fun, and people pay you a really good salary to do it. And yeah, and don't be afraid to make changes, or to move, or to find a new job. Obviously this is later on in their careers, but like, things don't always go swimmingly well, but that's okay. Change is very much a part of technology. Change happens, and you can embrace that and make it work for you.